Hello and welcome to the BMC Quick Course series. In this quick course, I will show you how to use Change Manager for DB2 to use the compare capability. Change Manager allows you to compare a set of structures. You can compare catalog to catalog, catalog to DDL, baseline to work list, or any combination of the four types. The output from the compare will always be CDL or Change Definition Language. CDL is a proprietary language that looks very much like DDL, but is slightly different. For instance, you may see a statement that says to alter table, add column X before column Y. Of course, you can't execute that in DB2, but you can import the file into Change Manager and analyze it to come up with the changes needed in the target environment. You will have the option to use two migrate profiles during the compare, and I will discuss those when we get to that screen. From the main menu, select option 2 for compare. You see compare 1 and compare 2. We don't like to call them source and target because it could get confusing. Compare is just to identify the differences between two sets of structures. The best way to remember what to put in compare 1 and 2 is to think of it this way. You want compare 1 to look like compare 2 when you're done. So compare 1 is the current state and compare 2 is what you want your eventual target to look like. You also see the four different types. You could use any combination of these four. For instance, you can compare baseline to baseline, or baseline to catalog, or work list to DDL, and so on. I've selected to compare a baseline to the catalog. Once you've selected the two compares, press enter. On this panel, you can specify the names of the two compares. If you are using baselines like I am here, you can wildcard part of the name and Change Manager will display a list of baselines. On compare 2, I specified the SSID of the catalog we'd like to compare. Notice that I was able to specify the group name as DJJ is a two-way sysplex. You can specify an output migrate profile in two places. This is the first, and it allows you to internally apply some change rules prior to the compare. For example, if the owners of my tables in the baseline are test, but I am comparing against a production subsystem which has the owner of prod, I would need to tell the compare to change the owner from test to prod prior to do the compare. In my example, the baseline and the catalog have the same attributes, so I don't need to put a migrate profile here. Press enter. From this panel, you can select the type of object you'd like to compare. Place a Y or an N under the type of object you would like to include in the compare. Next, there may be some attributes you would like to exclude. Place an S under the select options next to display a list of object attributes to exclude. Here is the second opportunity to use a migrate profile. Notice that only the change rules will be used from the migrate profile. Notice also that the change rules from this migrate profile will be used after the compare. For instance, if you're comparing two baselines in the test environment, the owner of the tables may be test, but in production, the owner could be prod. In that case, you use the migrate profile change rules to tell compare after it completes the comparison to change all the owners of tables from test to prod. The CDL will reflect those changes. Next, choose whether to run the compare in the foreground or in batch. I selected to run in the foreground. Because I chose to display the object attributes to exclude, I see this list. Place an N next to any attribute you'd like to compare to exclude. then press F3. We are back at the Options menu. Press Enter to continue. Enter a dataset name where you want your output CDL to go. Also enter an S next to all the options on the bottom of the screen. Press Enter. Notice the options in the middle of the screen. You have the option to identify only the objects that were created. In other words, objects in Compare 2, but not in Compare 1. You can also compare objects that are in both but have been altered. Lastly, you can compare objects that were dropped. In other words, objects in Compare 2, but not in Compare 1. Or you can select all three like I did here. This gives you a lot of flexibility in your compare. Press Enter. This is the input to compare. If you are familiar with the keywords, you can modify the input here. Press F3. Change Manager will always bring you back to this panel and require you to press Enter one more time in case you've changed your mind. Press Enter. This is the CDL. You will notice that the comments at the beginning of the file will display all the maintenance on the product. This is very important if you run into a problem and need to talk to support. Press F8. Next, you see the timestamp of when this compare was done. Notice the scope of the compare. Change Manager identified the scope from the baseline that was selected. Next, you see the beginning of the actual CDL commands. Press F8. The CDL continues. Even though it looks like DDL, you certainly would not be able to execute this directly in DB2. Notice the alter on line 62. We are moving a table from one table space to another. Of course, this could not be executed this way. It must be analyzed. To do that, you would need to create an import work ID, import this file, and analyze it. These steps are discussed and illustrated in the Import Quick course. Press F8. Lastly, you will see a summary report of all the differences compare found. There were 3 table spaces altered and 1 dropped for a total of 4. 1 table was altered and 1 dropped. The same for the indexes. You also have the totals at the bottom on line 112. Thank you for your time. For more information on any BMC Change Manager feature, please visit the quick courses in this series.